Hi, my name is Emma Carter, and today, I want to share my story about how to speak without pushing. I know it might sound like a strange topic, but if you've ever struggled with talking to people in a way that feels natural, without sounding forceful or trying too hard, then you'll understand exactly why I'm sharing this. I'm 21 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a college student, studying communications and psychology at the University of Texas. Ever since I was a child, I've always been fascinated by how people communicate. But despite studying communication, I had one major problem. I often felt like I was either too passive in conversations or too pushy. I wanted to find that balance where I could express myself clearly, confidently, and naturally, without making people feel uncomfortable or overwhelmed. For a long time, I didn't even realize I had this issue. I just thought people weren't listening to me enough, or maybe I wasn't interesting enough. But the truth was, the way I spoke made people either back away or feel like I was pressuring them. I had to learn the art of speaking without pushing, a way of communicating where people actually listen, engage, and respond naturally. Let me take you back to where it all started. The problem I didn't see growing up. I was always told to speak up. My parents, Michael and Linda Carter, always encouraged me to voice my opinions. "Don't let people talk over you, Emma," my mom would say. My dad would add, "If you don't speak up, people won't take you seriously." I took that advice to heart, but maybe a little too much. In school, I became that person who always made sure my voice was heard, sometimes by talking over people, sometimes by repeating myself, sometimes by pushing my opinions too forcefully. I thought this was confidence, but in reality, it wasn't working the way I thought. I noticed that people would nod and smile, but they wouldn't really engage with me. Sometimes they would change the subject or just agree without actually responding. I didn't understand why until one day my best friend Sophie Miller finally told me the truth. "Emma, you don't need to try so hard," she said one afternoon when we were studying at a coffee shop near campus. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "You always push when you talk," she explained, "like you try really hard to make people listen, but it actually makes them shut down. You don't give them space to think or respond. It's like you're trying to convince them, even when you don't need to." That hit me hard. I wasn't trying to push. I just wanted people to listen and take me seriously. But somehow, I was doing the opposite, making them disengage. That conversation changed everything for me. Learning to speak without pushing. From that moment, I decided to pay attention to how I spoke. I wanted to figure out exactly what I was doing wrong and how I could fix it. 1. Listening more than speaking. One of the biggest mistakes I made was talking too much. I thought being a good communicator meant saying a lot, but I realized that good communication is about listening just as much as talking. I started practicing active listening. Instead of jumping in with my thoughts, I focused on really hearing what the other person was saying. I repeated back key points to show I was listening, and I asked more questions instead of just responding with my own opinions. I noticed something interesting. When I listened more, people naturally wanted to hear my thoughts too. I didn't have to push anymore. 2. Lowering my voice and slowing down. Another thing I realized was that my tone and speed mattered. When I was excited or passionate, I spoke fast and loud, which sometimes made people feel overwhelmed. I started practicing slowing down and speaking in a calmer, more natural tone. This small change made a huge difference. Instead of feeling like I was pushing, people started feeling drawn into my words. 3. Using open-ended statements. Instead of forceful opinions, I used to say things like, "This is the best way to do it. You should definitely try this. Trust me, this is the right choice." Even though I didn't mean to be pushy, these statements sounded too strong, like I wasn't open to discussion. Instead, I started using phrases like, "I found this way really helpful. What do you think? Have you ever tried this? It worked for me, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think this could be a good option, but I'd love to know your perspective." Just changing my words made conversations so much better. Instead of feeling like I was forcing my ideas, I was inviting people into the conversation. The moment it clicked, one of the biggest tests of my progress came in my public speaking class. We had to give a persuasive speech, and I was nervous. I had always believed that being persuasive meant being strong, confident, and direct. But I decided to try a new approach, being persuasive without pushing. I spoke calmly, used stories and examples instead of just stating facts, and made sure to engage the audience by asking questions and pausing for their reactions. After my speech, my professor, Dr. Harris, smiled at me and said, "Emma, that was one of the most engaging speeches I've heard. You didn't just talk at us, you made us feel like we were part of the conversation." That moment made me realize I had finally learned how to speak without pushing. After that transformative moment in my life, I truly began to embrace the art of speaking without pushing. Every day became an opportunity to put into practice the lessons I had learned. I still remember one autumn afternoon in Austin when a seemingly ordinary group project turned into a real-life test of my new communication style. I was working on a project for my advanced communications seminar at the University of Texas, alongside a diverse group of students, including my longtime friend Sophie Miller, as well as newcomers like Jordan Rivera and Lucas Thompson. The assignment was to develop a community outreach campaign that would encourage young people to get involved in local civic activities, a topic that resonated deeply with all of us. In our first meeting, excitement mixed with a hint of tension, as each of us had strong ideas about what the campaign should look like. As the discussion got underway in a cramped study room at the university library, I could feel old habits stirring inside me. I had spent years learning that speaking up was essential, but now I knew that it was equally important to listen and invite others into the conversation. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this is the moment to truly connect without pushing. When Lucas enthusiastically laid out his idea, a vibrant social media campaign featuring short, authentic video stories from local volunteers, I noticed that some group members hesitated. Jordan, who was usually quiet, had his hand raised tentatively. I recognized that familiar nervous energy from my own past. Instead of immediately diving into my own ideas or offering a counterpoint, I leaned forward, maintained eye contact, and said, "Lucas, that's a creative start. I'm curious, what inspired you to choose that approach?" My tone was calm, my voice measured, and I made sure to pause after asking the question. Lucas's eyes lit up as he explained how he had been inspired by a local volunteer event he attended last summer. He described the energy, the laughter, and the sense of community he'd felt. His narrative was vivid and sincere. The room slowly filled with nods and soft murmurs of agreement. Jordan then added, "I think we could also include stories from people who felt they were once on the sidelines and now have found a voice." Instead of cutting him off or trying to dominate the discussion, I smiled and said, "That's a brilliant idea, Jordan. I'd love to hear more about how we could integrate that perspective." In that moment, I felt a deep sense of relief. The conversation had transformed into a collaborative exchange, and everyone's voice was valued. It wasn't just about choosing the right words. It was about the space we created for each other. I remembered all too well the times I'd been so eager to prove myself that I'd ended up overpowering the conversation. Now, by consciously choosing to slow down and genuinely listen, I discovered that my peers were more engaged than ever. Even Professor Dr. Harris, who observed our session from the back of the room, later commented on the natural flow and inclusivity of our discussion. One day, after a particularly engaging meeting, Sophie and I sat on a bench outside the campus library. The golden hues of the late afternoon sun painted the sky, and for a few quiet moments, we simply enjoyed the warmth and gentle breeze. Sophie looked at me with a mixture of pride and empathy and said, "You know, Emma, it's incredible to see how much you've grown. Remember when you used to feel like you had to fight for every word you said? Now, you're making room for others and letting the conversation breathe." Her words resonated deeply with me. It wasn't just about being heard, it was about making others feel heard too. Yet, the journey wasn't always smooth. There were moments when old habits threatened to creep back in. In one such instance, during a heated debate in one of my elective classes on conflict resolution, a classmate named Rachel questioned a point I made about community engagement strategies. My first instinct was to defend my stance vigorously, to push back and prove that I was right. I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that once propelled me to talk over others. But then I paused. I remembered the countless hours spent practicing active listening and the lessons from my public speaking class. Taking a deliberate breath, I looked directly at Rachel and said, "I appreciate your perspective, Rachel. Could you tell me more about how you see this strategy working differently?" My question wasn't a challenge, it was an invitation for dialogue. Rachel's surprise quickly melted into an earnest explanation. As she laid out her thoughts, I realized that by stepping back and simply encouraging her to elaborate, I not only diffused a potential conflict, but also enriched my own understanding of the subject. That day, the classroom discussion evolved into a genuine exchange of ideas, with no one feeling pushed or dismissed. Beyond the classroom, I began to see the impact of this new way of communicating in every aspect of my life. In my part-time job at a local bookstore in downtown Austin, I found that customers were drawn to my calm, empathetic approach. When a regular customer, Mr. Howard, came in looking frustrated about a book order mix-up, I listened carefully to his concerns. Instead of immediately offering a solution, I asked, "Can you share what part of this mix-up has been most challenging for you?" His initial irritation softened as he explained his situation in detail. By the time I suggested a resolution, he felt valued and understood, rather than just another complaint to be managed. That day, I realized that effective communication wasn't about how many words you spoke. It was about the quality of the connection you established. My journey also took me to a summer internship with a local media outlet that focused on community stories. There, I was tasked with interviewing local heroes and everyday people who were making a difference. I approached each interview with the same principle: listen first, speak second. I learned that behind every headline or story, there was a person with unique experiences and emotions. One of my most memorable interviews was with a community organizer named Teresa Jenkins, who was working tirelessly to revitalize a neglected neighborhood park. Teresa's passion was infectious, and by simply listening and asking thoughtful follow-up questions, I was able to capture the essence of her vision. The resulting article not only received praise from our editor, but also sparked conversations among residents about how they could contribute to positive change in their community. Through these experiences, I realized that speaking without pushing wasn't just a communication technique, it was a mindset. It was about respecting the space and voices of others while staying true to your own values. There were days when I doubted myself, wondering if I had lost the assertiveness that once defined me. But then I'd recall the countless instances where my new approach had transformed interactions for the better. Whether it was in the quiet corners of the university library, the bustling aisles of the bookstore, or the vibrant streets of Austin during a community event, I saw that speaking with genuine empathy and openness created bridges rather than barriers. I also started to share these insights with others. I organized small discussion groups on campus where students could practice active listening and non-pushy communication. In one memorable session, a student named Carlos confessed that he had always felt intimidated in class discussions, often fearing that his thoughts weren't valid. I encouraged him to speak up by reminding him that every perspective enriches the conversation. Over time, Carlos became one of the most articulate voices in the group, and his transformation was a testament to the power of speaking without pushing. Family gatherings, too, became moments of reflection and learning. At our annual family reunion in Dallas, I noticed that sometimes my younger cousins would become silent when I shared my views too forcefully. Recalling my own childhood struggles to be heard without overwhelming others, I made a conscious effort to invite their opinions. I would ask, What do you think about this idea? Or, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The change was palpable. The conversations became richer, more balanced, and every family member felt included. My parents, Michael and Linda Carter, were especially proud, remarking that I had found a way to blend the assertiveness they had always encouraged with a gentle approach that truly resonated with people. There were also personal challenges. During a particularly stressful semester, I found myself overwhelmed by academic pressure and the emotional weight of trying to maintain these new habits. In moments of self-doubt, I questioned whether I had compromised my ability to be assertive. It was during one of these low points that I sought guidance from Dr. Harris, who had become not just a professor, but also a mentor. Over a cup of coffee in his modest campus office, he shared a story from his early career, how he, too, had once struggled with the balance between assertiveness and empathy. He advised, "Emma, remember that true communication isn't about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about creating a space where every voice is valued. It's okay to be assertive when necessary, but let that assertiveness be tempered with genuine care for what others have to say." Dr. Harris's words were a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. I realized that speaking without pushing was not about silencing my voice or diminishing my passion. It was about channeling it in a way that invited connection rather than conflict. That semester, I worked diligently to refine my approach. I practiced mindfulness techniques to center myself before important discussions, revisited recordings of my past speeches to identify moments where I might have overwhelmed my listeners, and even kept a journal to reflect on every significant conversation. As the semesters passed, my confidence grew not from the volume of my voice, but from the quality of my interactions. I became known on campus as someone who could bridge divides, whether it was facilitating a debate between two opposing student groups or calming tensions during heated club meetings. My reputation for balanced communication even caught the attention of local community leaders, who invited me to participate in town hall meetings. There, amidst a room full of passionate advocates and skeptics alike, I learned that speaking without pushing was an ongoing process. Every conversation was an opportunity to learn and adapt, a dance where sometimes I led and sometimes I followed. One particularly defining experience came during a community forum on educational reform held at a civic center in downtown Austin. The discussion was intense, with various stakeholders, from parents and teachers to local politicians, voicing their concerns about the state of public education. As tensions escalated, I found myself sitting quietly in a corner, absorbing the heated exchanges. When it was my turn to speak, I recalled all that I had learned. I stood up, not with the intent to dominate, but with the aim of uniting the disparate voices. I began by acknowledging the passion in the room. I hear the frustration, the hope, and the desire for change in every word spoken here today. I then posed a series of questions designed to bring people together. What if we combined our ideas to create a comprehensive plan that addresses everyone's concerns? How can we build on each other's strengths to make our community's schools better for all our children? Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. The forum transformed from a battleground of conflicting opinions into a collaborative workshop. People started to share solutions, finding common ground where there was once only division. In that moment, I understood that my journey wasn't just about improving my own communication. It was about inspiring a more empathetic, inclusive way of engaging with the world. As I reflect on these experiences, I see how far I've come. From a young girl eager to be heard at any cost, to a woman who values the art of listening and gentle persuasion, my journey has been filled with challenges, growth, and moments of profound connection. The simple act of choosing words carefully, of inviting dialogue rather than dictating it, has transformed not only my relationships, but also the way I see the world. Even now, as I look ahead to a future filled with new opportunities and challenges, I carry these lessons with me. Whether I'm facing a critical meeting at work, engaging in a heartfelt conversation with a friend, or simply sharing my thoughts in a classroom discussion, I strive to remain grounded in the belief that every person deserves to be heard. Speaking without pushing isn't just a communication technique, it's a way of life that fosters mutual respect, understanding, and true connection. To anyone reading my story who might be grappling with similar challenges, I offer this advice. Take a step back, listen deeply, and trust that your voice matters. Not because you have to force it, but because it is a vital part of the shared conversation of life. The journey isn't always easy, and there will be moments when old habits resurface. But every time you choose to pause, to invite someone else's opinion, or to speak with calm conviction, you are building a bridge of understanding that can change not only your world, but also the world around you. As I continue to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of life here in the United States, with all its complexities, triumphs, and challenges, I remain committed to this approach. I know that speaking without pushing is a lifelong practice, one that requires constant reflection and adjustment. But I also know that in every genuine conversation, in every moment of quiet understanding, there is the potential for transformation. I remember that after reconnecting with Jessica, life began presenting me with even more opportunities to apply, and sometimes test, the art of speaking without pushing. One brisk morning in early November, I received an invitation to attend a roundtable discussion at a local cultural center in downtown Austin. The event was titled Voices of Change, a forum where community leaders, artists, and everyday citizens gathered to discuss issues from education and housing to cultural identity. I was both excited and nervous, knowing that the event would bring together a wide spectrum of opinions and passions. On the day of the roundtable, the room buzzed with anticipation. Among the participants were longtime community organizer Teresa Jenkins, local artist and activist Raymond Garcia, and a passionate high school teacher named Danielle Reed, whose dedication to her students was well known in the area. I took my seat among them, feeling the weight of expectation, not to be the loudest, but to be the one who could connect disparate voices through measured, empathetic dialogue. As the discussion began, voices overlapped and the topics quickly grew heated. I watched as Raymond argued fervently about the need for more public art to celebrate Austin's cultural diversity, while Danielle passionately contended that practical investments in education were paramount. The moderator's attempts to mediate were earnest, but soon faltered under the rising tension. At that moment, I remembered all the lessons I'd learned over the years. The power of pausing, of inviting dialogue, and of truly listening. When the floor opened for contributions, I took a slow, deliberate breath and said, I can see that every one of you carries a deep commitment to making our community better. I wonder if we might explore a path that acknowledges both our need for cultural expression and our commitment to education. What if the solution lies in a partnership between local artists and schools? An initiative that not only beautifies our public spaces, but also enriches students' lives through creative programs? My tone was gentle, inviting, and I purposely left a pause afterward to let the idea settle. The effect was palpable. Danielle's eyes softened as she considered the potential for cross-collaboration, and Raymond's tense posture eased into one of curiosity. Within minutes, the conversation shifted from entrenched positions to brainstorming. Voices that had been raised in anger now fell into a rhythm of respectful dialogue, with several participants nodding in agreement and offering ideas to bridge the gap between art and education. That day, as I stepped out into the crisp Austin air, I felt a profound satisfaction, a sense that speaking without pushing had not only averted conflict, but had actively nurtured creative, constructive solutions. My journey continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Later that winter, I began a volunteer role with a nonprofit dedicated to empowering youth through public speaking and creative expression. The program was based in a modest community center in East Austin, where many students from diverse backgrounds gathered after school. I was assigned to mentor a group of teenagers, one of whom was a shy young man named Marcus Rivera. Marcus was brilliant, but often retreated into silence during group activities, his quiet nature misunderstood by teachers and peers alike as disinterest or lack of confidence. I remembered my own struggles as a young girl who felt the pressure to be heard, and how I sometimes ended up overwhelming others unintentionally. With Marcus, I took a different approach. During our sessions, instead of launching into lengthy lectures about public speaking, I began by simply asking, "What do you feel when you listen to someone speak?" And, "How do you think you might share your own ideas in a way that invites others to listen?" We spent hours together, experimenting with pauses, varying our tone, and practicing active listening techniques. Over time, Marcus began to share more. I recall the moment during one session when, after a thoughtful silence, he timidly said, "I've got an idea, but I'm not sure if it's right." Instead of dismissing his uncertainty, I encouraged him by saying, "That's a great start. Let's explore it together." That moment of validation sparked a transformation in him. By the end of the program, Marcus had led a small group discussion on the power of art in community building, and he did so with quiet conviction and an inviting presence that brought everyone into the conversation. Outside of formal settings, everyday life continued to offer lessons in the art of balanced communication. On a rainy afternoon in March, while waiting in a line at a bustling coffee shop in downtown Austin, I overheard a heated exchange between a customer and the barista over a misunderstood order. The barista, clearly flustered, was trying to explain the mix-up, while the customer's tone escalated into frustration. Remembering my own experiences of conflict resolution, I approached the counter with a calm smile and gently interjected, "I'm sorry there seems to be some confusion. Maybe we can try to figure this out together? Could you both tell me what happened?" My unexpected question diffused the tension for a moment, and both the customer and the barista took a step back. They each recounted their side of the story, and soon the problem was resolved in a way that left both parties feeling heard. It was a small moment, but it reaffirmed for me that the principles of speaking without pushing could be applied even in the most mundane of circumstances. That same spring, life threw another unexpected challenge my way. I was selected to co-lead a major project for a local environmental advocacy group. The goal was to organize a citywide cleanup initiative that involved schools, local businesses, and neighborhood associations. The planning sessions were intense, as the project touched on issues of local policy, community safety, and environmental justice. At one meeting, tensions flared when a longtime resident, Mr. Franklin, argued passionately that the cleanup effort should focus exclusively on preserving historical sites in our city. His perspective was rooted in a deep love for Austin's past, while other members argued for a more comprehensive approach that addressed current environmental hazards. Faced with such a polarized situation, I recalled my own earlier experiences at the round table. Instead of siding with one group, I addressed the assembly with a steady voice. "It's clear that each of us holds a vision for a better Austin, whether it's through preserving history or ensuring a clean, safe environment for all. Could we perhaps explore ways to honor both our past and our present needs?" I suggested forming smaller working groups that could focus on integrating historical preservation with modern environmental priorities. The suggestion was met with mixed reactions at first, but by the end of the meeting, several groups had formed with a shared commitment to collaborate. Later, during the final community presentation, Mr. Franklin even expressed his gratitude, saying, "I never thought I'd see the day when my passion for history could blend so seamlessly with environmental progress." His words were a powerful testament to the effectiveness of approaching conflicts with openness and respect. My ongoing journey with communication continued to weave itself into every facet of my life. I began to see the ripple effects of my efforts. Classmates felt more comfortable contributing in discussions, community meetings became more collaborative, and even within my family, conversations grew richer and more supportive. My parents, Michael and Linda Carter, often remarked on the difference in our family gatherings. "You've found a way to let everyone speak," my mother said during one Thanksgiving dinner, adding, "It's as if you've mastered the art of listening as much as speaking." Their words were a constant reminder that the journey of communication was not about diminishing one's own voice, but about empowering every voice at the table. Sometimes, though, the journey was not without moments of internal struggle. Late at night, when the campus was quiet and the weight of the day pressed upon me, I would reflect in my journal about times when I'd faltered. I'd write about moments when stress or fear of being misunderstood tempted me to revert to my old, forceful ways of speaking. There were days when the balance felt elusive, when the urge to speak with dominating intensity loomed over every conversation. In those moments, I would remind myself of the countless instances when pausing, listening, and inviting dialogue had transformed conflicts into collaborations. I knew that growth was not linear and that every misstep was an opportunity to refine my approach further. One crisp evening, as I was leaving a community event at a local park, I found myself in a quiet conversation with a retired teacher named Eleanor James. We sat on a bench under the soft glow of street lamps, discussing how society often equates being heard with having the loudest voice. Eleanor, who had spent decades in classrooms across Texas, shared her own journey of learning to appreciate the quieter voices of her students. In my experience, she said, it wasn't the teacher who shouted the loudest who made the most impact. It was the one who listened and understood. Her wisdom resonated with me deeply, reaffirming that the true art of communication was about connection, empathy, and the courage to speak softly in a world that often rewards the opposite. Looking ahead, I began to see that every conversation was a microcosm of the larger challenges we face in society. Whether in community forums, school projects, or simple daily exchanges, the principles of speaking without pushing held the potential to bridge divides and foster understanding. My blog, The Art of Speaking Softly, continued to grow as I shared these experiences, and I found myself invited to speak at various events across Texas. I spoke about my personal journey, not as a tale of perfection, but as a living, evolving story of learning to value every voice, including my own. In each speech, I emphasized that the strength of our communication lies not in overpowering others, but in empowering them to share their truths. Through it all, I learned that my journey was never truly about me alone. It was about the ripple effect, how one person's willingness to speak with openness could inspire countless others to do the same. From the shy student who found the courage to share his ideas, to the passionate community member whose voice was once drowned out by conflict, every story was interwoven with the simple truth that connection thrives on empathy. In every conversation, I now saw an opportunity, a chance to learn, to bridge gaps, and to build a more compassionate world. As I continue on this path, I remain ever grateful for every moment, every person, and every challenge that has taught me the true art of communication. I know that the journey of speaking without pushing is ongoing, with each day offering new lessons and fresh opportunities to connect on a deeper level. Whether I am addressing a packed room of community leaders, mentoring a nervous teenager, or simply sharing a quiet coffee with an old friend, I carry with me the belief that every voice deserves to be heard, and that the most powerful conversations are those that leave space for all of us to speak, listen, and grow together. As the months turned into another busy semester, my journey of learning to speak without pushing continued to shape every interaction I encountered. One crisp evening in late October, I found myself at a panel discussion on campus, organized by the university's student council. The topic was social media and authenticity in communication, and the room was filled with a mix of skeptical students, eager activists, and influential community voices. I had been invited to moderate the discussion, a role that felt both exhilarating and intimidating. Preparing for the panel, I revisited all the strategies I had learned over time: active listening, mindful pauses, and inviting questions rather than dictating conclusions. The panel featured a range of perspectives. On one side was Derek Nguyen, a passionate social media strategist who argued for bold, unapologetic messaging. On the other, Marisol Vega, a community organizer who believed that authenticity meant vulnerability and careful dialogue. The tension between their viewpoints mirrored many of the conversations I'd experienced before. When the discussion began, the air in the lecture hall grew charged. Derek's energetic delivery was immediately met with equal intensity by Marisol's reflective counterpoints. I sensed that, without careful guidance, the debate might spiral into the kind of clash that left little room for real understanding. Remembering the lessons from past experiences, I gently interjected with, "Both of you bring incredible insights to the table. I'd love to explore how your approaches might actually complement each other, rather than compete." Derek, could you share an example of how bold messaging has spurred real engagement? And Marisol, in what ways can vulnerability foster deeper trust? My question created a brief pause, a moment of collective reflection that allowed each speaker to shift focus from defending their position to considering a broader, integrative narrative. Derek explained how a powerful, decisive campaign had rallied a community to action, while Marisol recounted how sharing personal stories had inspired hesitant students to speak out about their own experiences. Their voices, once seemingly at odds, began weaving together a dialogue that underscored the value of both assertiveness and empathy. By the end of the session, even the most skeptical attendees seemed visibly moved by the possibility of a communication style that respected diverse voices. After the panel, I received messages from several students and even some faculty members who appreciated the gentle, inclusive way the conversation had evolved. One email from a junior named Alicia resonated deeply. She wrote that my approach had encouraged her to speak up in class without fear of being overpowered by more dominant voices. In that moment, I felt that all the small steps, the patient hours at the coffee shop, the countless practice sessions with Marcus, and even the quiet moments of self-reflection, had converged into something meaningful. A few weeks later, an opportunity presented itself that further challenged my ability to mediate sensitive dialogue. I was invited to assist in organizing a community town hall meeting addressing local transportation issues in a historically underserved neighborhood in Austin. The stakes were high. Community members, local business owners, and city officials were all present, and decades of frustration had built up over a lack of responsive governance. As tensions mounted and voices began to rise in anger, I stepped forward, channeling the same calm conviction that had become my trademark. I acknowledged the pain and urgency in each person's tone, saying, "I can feel the passion and frustration in this room. Every voice here carries a story of perseverance and hope. What if we begin by sharing one small success from our community? Something that reminds us of our collective strength? Let's start with that." The response was unexpected. A few residents began recounting personal victories: a local initiative that had improved street lighting, a small business that had thrived despite odds, and even a youth project that had brought neighbors together for a community garden. As the conversation shifted to these shared triumphs, the overwhelming anger softened, replaced by cautious optimism. City officials, who had initially braced for conflict, began to listen intently and took notes on suggestions that were now emerging organically. That evening, as I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I reflected on how every carefully chosen word had helped transform an explosive environment into one where empathy and understanding could flourish. In quieter moments, I continued to nurture my blog, The Art of Speaking Softly. With each new post, I detailed my experiences, shared practical tips, and invited readers to recount their own moments of breakthrough communication. The blog became a vibrant space for dialogue, where comments from students, professionals, and community members converged to celebrate the idea that true power lies not in speaking the loudest, but in speaking in a way that invites others to share their truths. Looking back on these experiences, I realized that my journey had grown far beyond my own need to be heard. It had become about creating spaces where every individual felt empowered to voice their ideas, and where dialogue, genuine, heartfelt, and unforced, could spark change. Every day offered a new lesson in humility and resilience, a chance to practice the art of connecting with people on a human level. Even as I continued to face challenges and moments of doubt, I remained steadfast in the belief that the world could be changed one conversation at a time. I learned that speaking without pushing wasn't about compromising my own beliefs. It was about fostering an environment where diverse perspectives could coexist and enrich one another. And with each conversation, whether in the hallowed halls of academia, in a bustling coffee shop, or at a community meeting on a cool autumn night, I found more proof that this gentle approach could break down even the most stubborn walls of resistance. I am Emma Carter, a student, a mentor, a moderator, and above all, a believer in the transformative power of listening and speaking with care. My journey is ongoing, and every step teaches me that when we invite others to join in our dialogue, we create a world where every voice, no matter how soft, matters. Below is a comprehensive list of tips and tricks to help you speak without pushing, ensuring that your voice is heard while also inviting others to share their perspectives. These strategies are designed to improve your communication by fostering mutual respect and genuine connection. 1. Practice active listening. Tip: make a conscious effort to truly listen before responding. Details: focus on the speaker, remove distractions, and give your full attention. Reflect and summarize. Paraphrase what you've heard to show you're engaged. E.g., so what I'm hearing is. Ask clarifying questions. Encourage the speaker to expand on their ideas by asking, "Can you tell me more about that?" Trick: during conversations, imagine you're a mirror. Reflect back the essence of what the other person is saying. This not only validates their thoughts, but also sets the stage for a more balanced dialogue. Second mind your tone and pace. Tip: use a calm, steady tone and moderate your pace to create a welcoming atmosphere. Details: slow down your speech. This allows others time to process your words and respond. Control your volume. Speaking too loudly can feel overwhelming. A gentle tone is more likely to be received positively. Pause purposefully. Strategic pauses can emphasize your point and give space for reflection. Trick: record yourself during a practice session. Listen to the playback and adjust any parts where you might sound too forceful. 3. Use open-ended questions and inviting language. Tip: frame your contributions in a way that encourages dialogue rather than dictating opinions. Details: ask open-ended questions. Use phrases like, "What are your thoughts on?" or "How do you feel about?" Invite input. Instead of stating, "This is the best way, try." "I've found this method helpful. What do you think about it?" Avoid absolute language. Replace words like always or never with softer alternatives. Trick: when preparing for a conversation, list a few open-ended questions in advance to ensure you're ready to invite others' insights. Fourth, be conscious of your body language. Tip: align your nonverbal cues with your intention to create a safe space for dialogue. Details: maintain an open posture. Avoid crossing your arms or turning away, which can signal defensiveness. Use eye contact appropriately. It shows attentiveness and respect. Smile and nod. Subtle gestures can help encourage others to speak freely. Trick: stand in front of a mirror or record yourself during a practice conversation to assess if your body language is as open and welcoming as your words. 5. Utilize I statements. Tip: focus on expressing your own experiences and feelings rather than making generalizations about others. Details: express your perspective. Say, "I feel," or "I think," to clarify that you're sharing personal views. Avoid blame. Instead of "you never listen," say, "I feel unheard when I don't get a chance to share my thoughts." Promote ownership. This helps keep the conversation focused on your feelings rather than triggering defensive responses. Trick: practice converting accusatory phrases into I statements to make them sound less confrontational and more collaborative. 6. Validate others' perspectives. Tip: acknowledge that every person's opinion is valuable, even if it differs from your own. Details: show empathy. Use phrases like, I understand where you're coming from, or that makes sense, given your experience. Agree on common ground. Even if you disagree, find a point of mutual understanding. Avoid dismissive language. Instead of interrupting or correcting immediately, allow the other person to express their full thought. Trick: during discussions, make a mental note of points where you genuinely agree with the other person and highlight these areas to build rapport. 7. Embrace silence and allow space. Tip: don't be afraid of moments of silence. They can be powerful in giving everyone a chance to think. Details: allow pauses. After asking a question, wait a few seconds before speaking again. Value reflection. Silence can help both you and the other person process information more deeply. Avoid filling every gap. Recognize that constant talking can sometimes push others to withdraw. Trick: use a timer when practicing discussions to become comfortable with intentional pauses, gradually increasing the pause length until it feels natural. 8. Develop self-awareness through reflection. Tip: regularly reflect on your conversations to identify moments where you may have come off as too forceful. Details: keep a journal. Write down interactions, noting what worked well and what could be improved. Review your responses. Think about situations where you felt the conversation did not go as planned and analyze why. Learn from feedback. Ask trusted friends or mentors for honest input about your communication style. Trick: after challenging conversations, take a few minutes to jot down 3 things you did well and 2 things to work on. 9. Stay open to feedback. Tip: actively seek out and accept feedback on your communication style. Details: ask for constructive criticism. Invite others to share how your words made them feel. Be receptive. Listen without becoming defensive and consider their points carefully. Implement changes. Use feedback to adjust your approach and continue improving. Trick: create a feedback loop by scheduling periodic check-ins with a friend or colleague where you discuss communication experiences and share insights. 10. Set clear intentions before conversations. Tip: start every interaction with a clear intention to connect rather than dominate. Details: visualize success. Before entering a conversation, imagine it unfolding in a calm, respectful manner. Affirm your goals. Remind yourself that your goal is to engage and understand, not just to be heard. Prepare mentally. A short mindfulness exercise or deep breathing routine can help center your thoughts. Trick: develop a pre-conversation ritual, a brief meditation, a few deep breaths, or a mental checklist to set the stage for balanced communication. 11th, manage your emotions. Tip: recognize and regulate your emotions to avoid letting them drive a pushy communication style. Details: practice mindfulness. Regular mindfulness exercises can help you remain calm under pressure. Recognize triggers. Identify situations or topics that tend to make you more forceful and prepare strategies to manage them. Take a break if needed. If you feel emotions escalating, excuse yourself for a moment to regroup. Trick: learn and use simple, deep breathing techniques during conversations, such as inhaling for a count of 4, holding for 4, and exhaling for 4, to maintain calmness. 12th, adjust your communication style to the context. Tip: tailor your approach based on the setting and the people involved. Details: formal versus informal. Adapt your language and tone to suit academic, professional, or casual environments. Audience awareness. Consider the background, mood, and preferences of your audience. Flexibility. Be willing to change your approach if the situation calls for a softer or more assertive style. Trick: before joining a conversation, quickly assess the context and think about the best communication style to adopt. This mental adjustment can guide your tone and language choices effectively. By integrating these tips and tricks into your daily interactions, you can build a communication style that is both assertive and inviting. The key lies in balancing your own need to express with an equal commitment to understanding and valuing the voices of others. Whether you're in a classroom discussion, a community meeting, or a casual conversation with friends, these strategies will help you create a space where dialogue thrives without any sense of pressure or pushiness. You said, more tips reasoned for 7 seconds. Below are additional tips and strategies to further refine your ability to speak without pushing. These techniques are designed to complement the earlier tips by deepening your understanding of balanced communication and fostering even more effective, empathetic conversations. 13. Embrace vulnerability in your speech. Tip: open up about your own challenges and experiences to build trust and authenticity. Details: share personal stories. Instead of asserting an opinion as the only truth, relate it to your own journey. Show humility. Acknowledge that you, too, are learning and growing. Invite empathy. Vulnerability encourages others to connect on an emotional level, paving the way for mutual understanding. Trick: when discussing a challenging topic, start with a brief anecdote about a time when you struggled. This approach can disarm tension and invite a more genuine exchange. 14. Adopt a collaborative mindset. Tip: approach conversations as opportunities for collective problem solving rather than debates to win an argument. Details: use inclusive language. Replace "you should" or "this is right" with phrases like "how can we" or "what if we tried." Focus on shared interests. Emphasize common goals and mutual benefits. Build on ideas together. Encourage contributions that complement rather than compete with each other. Trick: visualize the conversation as a team effort where each participant contributes to a shared solution. This mental shift can help reduce any feelings of confrontation. 15. Focus on common goals. Tip: identify and highlight shared objectives as a foundation for constructive dialogue. Details: find common ground. Before diving into details, mention the overall goal you and your conversation partner share. Bridge differences. Emphasize how various perspectives can contribute to a more well-rounded outcome. Keep the end in sight. Reminding everyone of the common purpose can steer the conversation away from personal conflicts.